My name is Evan Carter, and I should have known something was wrong when my wife started wearing perfume to take out the trash. 24 years of marriage teaches you things. Like how Marta hums off key when she's nervous, how she alphabetizes the spice rack when she's angry, and how she kisses you like you're her Uber driver when she's hiding something big. Thursday morning, she gave me that Uber driver kiss before I left for my business trip to Chicago. "Have a good flight, honey," she said, already scrolling through her phone. The same phone she'd been guarding like state secrets for the past 3 months. I'm a financial consultant now, freelance work that pays well enough to keep our suburban lifestyle afloat. Used to be a corporate finance manager until I got tired of the rat race and decided family came first. Funny how that decision was about to bite me in the ass. The flight to Chicago got delayed, then canceled. Some mechanical issue that left 300 passengers stranded at O'Hare with nothing but overpriced airport food and broken promises from the airline. By the time I made it back home to Millbrook Heights at 10:30 that night, I was exhausted, hungry, and ready to collapse into bed next to my loving wife. Except Marta wasn't there. The house felt wrong the moment I walked in. The TV was on in the living room, tuned to some romantic comedy I'd never seen Marta watch. Her wine glass sat on the coffee table, lipstick stain on the rim, still half full. The expensive Chardonnay she only opened for special occasions. "Marta?" I called out, dropping my overnight bag by the door. Silence. I checked the garage. Her BMW was gone. The digital clock on the microwave glowed 10:47 p.m., pretty late for one of her agency dinners that had become so frequent lately. That's when I noticed the scarf. A silk scarf I'd never seen before, draped over the back of our dining room chair. Burgundy with gold trim, the kind of thing that cost more than my monthly gym membership. Definitely not Marta's style. She preferred simple, professional accessories that projected competence rather than luxury. My phone buzzed. A text from Marta. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at that message, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. The timestamp showed 10:15 p.m., but the wine glass in our living room was still wet with condensation. Either Marta had developed the ability to be in 2 places at once, or my wife of 24 years was lying to me. I've always been good with numbers, with details that don't add up. It's what made me successful in finance, what helped me spot discrepancies in budgets and catch accounting errors that others missed. And right now, the numbers in my marriage weren't adding up. I opened the Find My iPhone app on my phone. Marta and I had shared locations for years, a practical decision after she got lost driving to a client meeting in an unfamiliar part of town. The little blue dot that represented my wife wasn't at her office downtown. It was at 1247 Lakeshore Drive, Mills Lake, the expensive part of town where advertising executives and successful lawyers built their dream homes. I'd never heard Marta mention anyone who lived on Lakeshore Drive. The smart thing would have been to wait until morning, to ask her about it over coffee like a mature, trusting husband. But 24 years of marriage had also taught me that sometimes the smart thing and the right thing weren't the same. I grabbed my keys and headed for Mills Lake. The drive took 25 minutes through winding suburban roads lined with oak trees and houses that cost more than most people made in 5 years. 1247 Lakeshore Drive turned out to be a sprawling contemporary home with floor-to-ceiling windows and a circular driveway. Very modern, very expensive, very much not the kind of place my wife had any business being at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. Marta's BMW sat in the driveway next to a classic red Mustang and a silver Lexus SUV. Lights glowed warmly in the windows, and I could see figures moving around inside. I parked on the street, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me wanted to march up to that front door and demand answers. The other part, the part that had been married long enough to know that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again, wanted to drive home and pretend I'd never seen that blue dot on my phone. Instead, I did something I'd never done in my life. I became a spy in my own marriage. The house sat on a large lot with mature landscaping that provided plenty of cover. I made my way around to the side yard, staying low behind a row of ornamental bushes. The contemporary design meant lots of windows, which was good for seeing inside, but bad for staying hidden. Through the first window, I saw a living room that belonged in a magazine. Leather furniture, abstract art, a fireplace that probably cost more than my car. And there, on the white sectional sofa, was my wife. She wasn't alone. Marta sat curled up against a man I didn't recognize, her head on his shoulder, laughing at something he'd said. He was younger than me, maybe early 40s, with the kind of carefully styled hair and expensive casual clothes that screamed creative professional. His hand rested possessively on her thigh. But it was the third person in the room that made my blood boil. Victoria. Marta's younger sister, the one who'd been divorced 3 times and treated marriage like a hobby she could pick up and discard at will. She sat across from them in a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's rent, holding a champagne flute and gesturing dramatically as she told some story. I watched my wife laugh at something Victoria said, watched her lean closer to the stranger, watched her do things with her hands that she hadn't done with me in years. The easy intimacy, the casual touches, the way she looked at him like he was the most fascinating person in the world. 24 years of marriage, and I was watching it die through a stranger's window. My phone vibrated. Another text from Marta. Going to be really late. Presentation ran long. Love you. I looked at the timestamp, then back through the window where my wife was feeding champagne-soaked strawberries to her new friend. That's when I knew. This wasn't a one-time mistake, wasn't some moment of weakness that could be explained away. This was deliberate, calculated, ongoing. The late nights, the new perfume, the guarded phone, the expensive scarf in our dining room. How long had this been going on? How many lies had I swallowed without question? I was about to find out. I spent the next 3 days acting like everything was normal while conducting what I like to think of as a forensic audit of my marriage. If Marta wanted to play games with the truth, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent 20 years analyzing financial records, finding discrepancies, following money trails. Tracking lies wasn't that different from tracking missing funds. The first thing I did was establish a timeline. When had the late nights started? When had Marta begun guarding her phone like Fort Knox? When had she stopped initiating conversations about anything deeper than grocery lists and utility bills? 3 months ago, right around the time her advertising agency landed the Hartwell Industries account, their biggest client win in 5 years. Marta had been promoted to senior account executive, which meant longer hours, more client dinners, and apparently more opportunities to meet men who drove classic Mustangs. I created a spreadsheet. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but old habits die hard. Date, time, Marta's claimed location, actual location when I could verify it, unusual behavior, lies told. The pattern that emerged was damning. 17 late client meetings in the past month. 9 emergency strategy sessions on weekends. 5 girls' nights out that lasted until 2 a.m. And according to her credit card statements, which I still had access to through our joint account, she'd been shopping for lingerie at stores I'd never heard of. Friday morning, I called in a favor from my old college roommate Mike, who now worked in private security. Not for anything illegal, just for some basic information about the house on Lakeshore Drive. It belongs to Jake Turnbull, Mike told me over coffee at our usual spot downtown. Creative director at Morrison & Associates. Divorced last year, though apparently he's been fighting the settlement. Word is he likes to throw parties for the advertising crowd. Morrison & Associates, Marta's agency. You okay, man? Mike asked, studying my face. You look like someone ran over your dog. Something like that, I said. That evening, Marta announced another late night. Big presentation Monday morning, she said, not meeting my eyes. Victoria's going to help me practice. You know how good she is at this stuff. Victoria, who'd never worked a day in advertising in her life. Victoria, who'd been at Jake Turnbull's house on Thursday night wearing a robe that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Sure," I said. "I'll probably just watch the game and go to bed early." She kissed my forehead like I was her grandfather and headed for the door. This time, I was ready. I'd borrowed a pair of binoculars from Mike and parked in a different spot, across the lake where I could watch the house without being seen. Jake Turnbull's contemporary palace lit up like a Christmas tree around 8:30, and by 9 p.m., the party was in full swing. Through the binoculars, I watched my wife arrive in her BMW, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Black, form-fitting, expensive. The kind of dress a woman wears when she wants to be noticed, wanted to be desired. She kissed Jake Turnbull at the door like they were old lovers, not new colleagues. Victoria was already there, playing hostess in another silk creation that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She air-kissed Marta like they were starring in their own private soap opera, then handed her a champagne flute and gestured toward the living room. I counted 8 people total. All young, all attractive, all moving with the casual confidence of people who'd never worried about money or consequences. The advertising crowd, Mike had called them. Marta fit right in, laughing and gesturing and touching Jake's arm every few minutes like she was marking her territory. Around 11 p.m., the party started winding down. Guests began leaving in pairs, and by midnight only 4 people remained: Jake, Marta, Victoria, and another man I didn't recognize. That's when things got interesting. Victoria disappeared into what looked like a kitchen and returned with another bottle of champagne. The unknown man pulled out his phone and showed everyone something that made them all laugh. And Jake Turnbull put his arm around my wife's waist and pulled her close. I watched Marta melt into him like butter on warm toast, watched her tilt her head back and laugh at something he whispered in her ear. Watched her do things with her body language that she hadn't done with me since our honeymoon. The other man left around 12:30. Victoria disappeared upstairs, leaving Jake and Marta alone in the living room. I should have looked away then. Should have driven home and confronted her in the morning like a civilized person. Instead, I watched my marriage end through a pair of borrowed binoculars. They didn't have sex, at least not where I could see it. But they did everything else. The kissing, the touching, the whispered conversations that made them both laugh like teenagers. At one point, Jake got up and put on music, then pulled Marta to her feet for a slow dance that belonged in a movie about people who'd just discovered they were in love. I'd seen enough. The drive home took forever and no time at all. I felt numb, hollow, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything important. 24 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, shared dreams, shared disappointments, shared everything. And Marta was throwing it all away for a man who drove a classic Mustang and threw parties for the advertising crowd. She came home at 2:15 a.m., moving quietly through the house like she was trying not to wake me. I listened to her brush her teeth, listened to her slip into bed beside me, listened to her whisper, "Love you," into the darkness like she'd done thousands of times before. This time, I didn't whisper it back. Saturday morning, Marta slept until 10 a.m., which was unusual for someone who normally woke up at 6:30 sharp. When she finally appeared in the kitchen, she looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd had a very good time the night before. "How was the presentation practice?" I asked, not looking up from my newspaper. "Good," she said quickly. "Really good. Victoria had some great ideas." I'm sure she did. If Marta heard the edge in my voice, she didn't comment on it. She made herself coffee and toast, checked her phone 3 times in 5 minutes, then announced she was going shopping with her sister. "More presentation prep?" I asked. "Something like that." After she left, I went to our home office and fired up the computer. Time for phase 2 of my investigation. Social media is a wonderful thing when you're trying to catch someone in a lie. People post everything these days, especially people in advertising who treat their personal lives like marketing campaigns. Jake Turnbull's Instagram was a masterclass in humble bragging. Photos of expensive dinners, shots of his Mustang, artistic pictures of his lakefront house, and starting about 3 months ago, subtle changes. A second wine glass in the corner of a dinner photo, a woman's scarf draped over a chair, 2 coffee cups on his kitchen counter. Victoria's Facebook was even more revealing. She'd been checking in at restaurants all over town, always with friends from the agency. Expensive places, romantic places, the kind of spots you took someone when you were trying to impress them. But it was Marta's LinkedIn that provided the smoking gun. She'd updated her profile 2 weeks ago, adding new skills and accomplishments. But more importantly, she'd connected with 17 new people from Morrison and Associates, including Jake Turnbull. Their connection was recent, but their interaction history showed they'd been messaging each other for months. I couldn't see the messages, but I could see the frequency. Sometimes multiple exchanges per day, often late at night or early in the morning, the digital equivalent of love letters. My phone rang. "Mike, found something else about your friend Jake Turnbull," he said. "Thought you might want to know." "I'm listening." "His divorce isn't final yet. Wife's fighting for half of everything, including the house. Word is she hired a private investigator because she suspects he's been hiding assets and income. If she can prove he's been living with another woman, it could affect the settlement." I felt something shift inside me, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. "Mike," I said, "how would someone go about documenting that kind of thing?" "Hypothetically speaking." He was quiet for a moment. "Hypothetically, someone would need photos, witnesses, financial records showing joint expenses. The kind of evidence that proves cohabitation or a serious ongoing relationship. And hypothetically, if someone had that kind of evidence, hypothetically, Jake Turnbull would be looking at losing about $2 million and his fancy lakefront house." After Mike hung up, I sat in my office staring at the computer screen. Marta thought she was so clever, sneaking around with her sister's help, playing house with a man who was still married to someone else. She had no idea that her new boyfriend was about to lose everything in a divorce settlement. But I had an idea. A terrible, wonderful, completely justified idea. If Marta wanted to destroy our marriage for a man who threw parties and drove a classic Mustang, that was her choice. But she was going to learn that actions have consequences, and some games have more than one player. I opened a new spreadsheet and started planning my revenge. Sunday morning brought the first real test of my acting abilities. Marta came downstairs wearing yoga pants and a tank top, looking refreshed and happy in a way that made my chest ache. She hummed while making coffee, actually hummed, like she was starring in her own personal romantic comedy. "Good morning, honey," she said, kissing my cheek. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," I lied. "You?" "Great. I was thinking we could drive out to that farmer's market in Riverside. Make a day of it." For a moment, I almost forgot about Jake Turnbull and the lakefront house and the lies. This was the Marta I'd fallen in love with 26 years ago, the one who suggested spontaneous adventures and kissed me like she meant it. But then I noticed the new bracelet on her wrist, delicate gold links that caught the morning light. "Pretty bracelet," I said. "When did you get that?" She glanced down like she'd forgotten she was wearing it. "Oh, this? Victoria gave it to me yesterday. Said it was an early birthday present. My birthday wasn't for 4 months. But Jake Turnbull's Instagram had featured a photo of that exact bracelet 3 days ago, artfully arranged next to a champagne glass with the caption, "Some gifts are worth waiting for." "That was thoughtful of her," I said. We spent the day at the farmer's market, buying organic vegetables and locally made honey, acting like a normal married couple doing normal married couple things. Marta was charming and attentive, holding my hand as we walked between the stalls, laughing at my jokes, suggesting we buy ingredients for the pasta dish I'd made on our second date. If I hadn't seen her dancing with Jake Turnbull in his living room, I might have convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. That evening, while Marta took a bath, I made some phone calls. The first was to our daughter Amelia, a junior at Northwestern studying journalism. She'd inherited my analytical mind and her mother's social skills, which made her an excellent source of information about anything happening in our extended social circle. "Hey, Dad," she said. "What's up?" "Just checking in. How are classes going?" "Good. Busy. I'm working on this investigative piece about social media and infidelity. Did you know that Facebook is cited in 1 out of every 5 divorce cases now?" The irony wasn't lost on me. That's fascinating. What kind of evidence do people find? Everything. Messages, photos, location data, financial records. People think they're being sneaky, but they leave digital footprints everywhere. It's like they want to get caught. Interesting. Hey, speaking of social media, have you noticed anything unusual about your mom's posts lately? Amelia was quiet for a moment. Actually, yeah. She's been posting a lot more photos, and they're all really, polished. Like she's trying to project this image of having this amazing, glamorous life. It's not really her usual style. Dad, is everything okay? You sound weird. Everything's fine, honey. Just curious about how people use social media these days. I'm old and trying to keep up. She laughed. You're not that old. But if you want to understand social media, you should follow some of Mom's agency friends. They post everything. I mean everything. After we hung up, I spent an hour creating fake social media accounts. Not for anything illegal, just for research purposes. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, generic profiles with stock photos and basic information. The advertising crowd was exactly as Amelia had described. They documented every meal, every party, every professional achievement. Jake Turnbull was particularly prolific, posting multiple times per day about his fabulous life and successful career. What he didn't realize was that his fabulous life was about to become evidence in his divorce case. I started screenshotting everything, photos from parties where I could identify Marta in the background, check-ins at restaurants on nights when she'd claimed to be working late, pictures of expensive gifts that had appeared in our house as presents from Victoria. Monday morning, I called Jake's ex-wife. I'd found her contact information through public records, and Mike had confirmed she was actively building a case against her soon-to-be ex-husband. Jennifer Turnbull was a family law attorney who specialized in high-asset divorces, which meant she knew exactly what kind of evidence would hold up in court. "Mrs. Turnbull, my name is Evan Carter. I have some information about your husband that might be relevant to your divorce case." She was quiet for a moment. "What kind of information?" "The kind that proves he's been cohabitating with another woman and spending marital assets on her." "I'm listening." I told her about the parties, the expensive gifts, the overnight visits. I offered to provide documentation, photographs, financial records. I explained that I had a personal interest in seeing Jake Turnbull face consequences for his actions. "Mr. Carter," she said when I finished, "are you asking me to hire you as a private investigator?" "I'm asking you to let me help you get what you're owed." She agreed to meet me that afternoon. Jennifer Turnbull turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s who looked like she could stare down a charging bull. Her law office was decorated with awards and diplomas, and her handshake could crack walnuts. "Show me what you have," she said. I spread out printed screenshots, credit card statements, timeline documents, and photos I'd taken through Jake's windows. She studied everything with the focused attention of a surgeon examining X-rays. "This is good," she said finally. "Very good. How did you obtain these photos?" "From a public area. I was never on his property." "And the financial information?" "Joint credit card statements with my wife. Perfectly legal for me to access." She nodded approvingly. "You mentioned you have a personal interest in this case. Jake Turnbull is having an affair with my wife. I'd like to see him face some consequences for that." "What kind of consequences?" "The legal kind. The expensive kind. The kind that make him think twice about breaking up other people's marriages." Jennifer Turnbull smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd built her career on making cheating husbands pay for their mistakes. "Mr. "Carter," she said, "I think we can help each other." That evening, Marta announced another late night at the office. "Big strategy session for the Hartwell account," she said. "Might be really late." "No problem," I said. "I've got some work to catch up on anyway." After she left, I drove to a coffee shop across from Morrison and Associates and waited. At 6:15, Jake Turnbull's red Mustang pulled out of the agency parking garage with Marta in the passenger seat. I followed them to an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance. Through the window, I watched them hold hands across the table like teenagers on their first date. Jake fed her bites of his dessert. Marta laughed at everything he said. I took photos of everything. Around 9 p.m., they left the restaurant and drove back to Jake's lakefront house. I parked in my usual spot across the lake and watched the lights come on in the living room. This time, I wasn't alone. Jennifer Turnbull sat in the passenger seat of my car with her own set of binoculars and a camera with a telephoto lens that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "There," she said, snapping photos as Jake and Marta appeared in the living room window. "And there. Perfect." We watched them dance again, watched them kiss, watched them act like people who thought they were invisible to the rest of the world. "How long has this been going on?" Jennifer asked. "At least 3 months that I can prove, probably longer." "And your wife has no idea you know?" "None." Jennifer lowered her camera and looked at me. "What's your end game here, Evan? What do you want to happen?" I thought about that question. What did I want? I wanted my marriage back, but that was impossible. I wanted Marta to feel the same betrayal and humiliation I'd felt, but that seemed petty. I wanted Jake Turnbull to face consequences for helping destroy my family, and that seemed achievable. "I want them to understand that actions have consequences," I said finally. "I want them to lose something that matters to them. Jake's about to lose his house and half his assets. Is that enough?" "It's a start." Jennifer smiled that predatory smile again. "Then let's finish this." The plan was simple, elegant, and completely legal. Jennifer would file an emergency motion to freeze Jake's assets based on evidence of cohabitation and dissipation of marital property. The motion would be served at his office, in front of his colleagues, on the same day that Morrison and Associates was presenting their biggest campaign of the year to the Hartwell Industries Board. The day I'd been planning for arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October. Marta left for work early, claiming she needed to prep for the big presentation. She kissed my cheek and told me she loved me, the same lie she'd been telling for months. "Break a leg today," I said, and meant it more literally than she realized. At 10 a.m., I positioned myself in the coffee shop across from Morrison and Associates with a clear view of the agency's main entrance. Jennifer had promised the process server would arrive at 10:30, right in the middle of the morning rush, when the lobby would be full of employees and clients. At 10:28, a serious-looking woman in a business suit walked through the agency's glass doors carrying a manila envelope. At 10:35, Jake Turnbull came flying out of those same doors looking like someone had just told him his house was on fire. He stood on the sidewalk, reading the legal documents, with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who'd just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. His face went from confused to angry to panicked in the space of 30 seconds. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language told the whole story. Frantic gestures, pacing back and forth, running his free hand through his carefully styled hair. This was a man whose world had just exploded. My phone buzzed. A text from Marta. "Something terrible happened at work. Can't talk now. We'll call later." I smiled and ordered another coffee. The afternoon brought more entertainment. According to Jennifer, who called me with updates every hour, Jake had hired an emergency attorney and was trying to get the asset freeze lifted. The attorney had explained that Jake's best option was to end the relationship immediately and provide evidence that he was no longer cohabitating with or supporting another woman. "He's in full panic mode," Jennifer reported. His lawyer advised him to cut all contact with your wife immediately. And? He's about to break her heart in a very public way. At 4 p.m., I drove to Morrison & Associates and parked where I could see the agency's parking garage exit. I didn't have to wait long. Jake's red Mustang screeched out of the garage at 4:15 with Marta in the passenger seat. Even from a distance, I could see they were arguing. The car jerked to a stop at the traffic light, and through the rear window, I could see Marta gesturing angrily while Jake stared straight ahead. They drove to the same expensive restaurant where they'd had their romantic dinner just a week earlier. This time, there was nothing romantic about it. I followed them inside and requested a table with a view of their booth. The hostess, probably assuming I was some kind of business traveler dining alone, seated me 3 tables away with a perfect line of sight. Jake was talking rapidly, leaning across the table with the desperate intensity of a man trying to explain why he was about to ruin both their lives. Marta's face went from confused to hurt to furious in the span of 5 minutes. She said something sharp enough to make Jake flinch. He responded with what looked like an apology, but she was already standing up, her chair scraping against the floor loud enough to make other diners turn and stare. Marta walked out of that restaurant with her head high and her dignity intact, but I could see the devastation in her eyes. Jake threw a handful of bills on the table and followed her, catching up in the parking lot for what looked like a final, desperate conversation. Whatever he said, it didn't work. Marta got into her BMW and drove away without looking back, leaving Jake standing alone next to his Mustang like a man who just watched his future disappear. I paid my check and headed home to wait for my wife. She came through the door at 7:30, moving like someone who'd been hit by a truck. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was disheveled, and she looked like she'd been crying for hours. "Rough day?" I asked from my chair in the living room. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and nodded. "The worst." "Want to talk about it?" For a moment I thought she might tell me the truth. Might sit down and explain about Jake and the affair, and the asset freeze, and the way her perfect fantasy had crashed into reality. Instead, she shook her head and headed for the stairs. "Just work stuff," she said. "I need to take a bath." I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, listened to the bathroom door close, listened to the water running in the tub. My wife was upstairs crying over another man, and I was downstairs planning the next phase of her education in consequences. The bath lasted an hour. When Marta finally came downstairs, she looked marginally more composed, but still fragile around the edges. "I'm not really hungry," she said. "I think I'll just go to bed early." "Sure," I said. "Feel better." She paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me. "Evan?" "Yeah?" "Do you ever think about what you'd do if everything fell apart? If all your plans just disappeared?" I met her eyes and smiled. "I'd make new plans." She nodded and went upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my laptop and the next phase of my revenge. Because Jake Turnbull's legal problems were just the beginning. The next morning brought a call from Jennifer Turnbull that made my coffee taste better than it had in months. "The emergency motion was granted," she said. "Jake's assets are frozen pending a full financial disclosure. He can't sell anything, can't make any major purchases, and can't transfer money without court approval." What does that mean for him practically? It means he's about to discover what it feels like to be financially powerless. His credit cards are frozen, his bank accounts are restricted, and he can't even pay his mortgage without filing paperwork with the court. And the house? He'll probably lose it. The mortgage payments alone are more than he can afford on his restricted budget, and he can't sell it to pay off the debt. I'd say he's got maybe 2 months before the bank starts foreclosure proceedings. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Jake Turnbull had helped destroy my marriage, and now he was losing everything that mattered to him. It was poetic justice with a legal framework, but I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I drove to Morrison & Associates and asked to speak with Dave Millant, the agency's managing partner. I'd done my homework on Dave, a 60-something veteran of the advertising world who'd built his reputation on running a clean, professional operation. "Mr. Carter," he said, shaking my hand in his corner office. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to discuss a situation involving two of your employees that might affect the agency's reputation." Dave's expression sharpened. He'd been in business long enough to recognize the tone of someone bringing bad news. I laid out the facts calmly and professionally. Jake Turnbull's ongoing divorce case, the asset freeze, the evidence of an affair with a married colleague, the potential impact on client relationships if the story became public. "The Hartwell Industries people are very conservative," I said. "Family values, traditional morals, that sort of thing. If they discover that their campaign is being managed by people involved in a messy adultery scandal, they might reconsider their relationship with the agency." Dave listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail provided. "What evidence do you have of this alleged affair?" he asked. I showed him printed screenshots from social media, photos from restaurants, documentation of Jake and Marta's after-hours activities. Everything legal, everything obtained through public sources, everything damning. "Mr. Carter," Dave said when I finished, "may I ask why you're bringing this to me instead of handling it privately?" "Because my wife and her boyfriend work for you, and their personal drama is about to become very public. I thought you deserved a heads up before it affects your business." Dave studied the documents for several minutes, his expression growing darker. Finally, he looked up at me with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too many talented people destroy their careers over stupid decisions. "I'll handle this," he said. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention." I left Morrison and Associates feeling lighter than I had in months. Dave Millant hadn't gotten where he was by tolerating employees who created liability issues for the agency. Jake and Marta were about to discover that workplace affairs had professional consequences, too. That evening, Marta came home looking like she'd been put through a blender. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her confidence was shattered, and she moved through our house like a ghost, haunting her former life. "Bad day?" I asked. "The worst," she said, echoing her response from the night before. "Jake and we're not working together anymore." Dave reassigned the accounts. "That's too bad. I thought you two made a good team." She looked at me sharply, as if trying to detect sarcasm in my voice. I kept my expression neutral. "Yeah," she said. "We did." Over dinner, she picked at her food and stared out the window like she was watching her dreams disappear into the distance. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Marta," I said, "is there anything you want to tell me?" She met my eyes for the first time in weeks, and for a moment I thought she might confess everything. Might apologize for the lies and the betrayal and the months of treating me like a stranger in my own marriage. Instead, she shook her head. "Just work stress. It'll pass." That night, I lay in bed listening to my wife cry softly into her pillow, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. If she wanted to keep lying to me, that was her decision. But the lies were getting more expensive every day. The next morning brought a call from our son Ross, who was working his first job out of college in Denver. "Dad," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me." "Shoot." "Are you and Mom having problems?" I was quiet for a moment, surprised by the directness of the question. "Why do you ask?" "Because Amelia called me last night worried about you guys. She said Mom's been acting weird on social media, posting all these pictures that don't look like her real life. And you've been asking strange questions about infidelity and social media evidence." My kids were smarter than I'd given them credit for. "Ross," I said, "your mother and I are going through some difficulties right now. I can't give you details, but I want you to know that whatever happens, it's not your fault or Amelia's. Is she having an affair?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. I could lie, could protect him from the ugly truth about his mother's choices. Or I could treat him like the adult he'd become and trust him to handle the reality of his parents' marriage. Yes, I said. She is. Ross was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "What are you going to do?" "I'm handling it." "Do you need me to come home?" "No, but I might need you and your sister to be strong in the coming weeks. Things are going to get complicated." "Dad?" "Yeah? I'm sorry this is happening to you. You don't deserve this." After we hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall and feeling something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. That had broken weeks ago. Something deeper. The part of me that had believed in fairness, in loyalty, in the idea that good people could trust each other. Marta had destroyed that, and now she was going to pay for it. But first, I had one more call to make. The call I made was to Karen Walsh, our next-door neighbor, and the unofficial communications director for Millbrook Heights. Karen knew everything about everyone within a 5-mile radius, and she had the social media reach to make or break reputations with a single Facebook post. "Karen," I said, "I need to ask you a favor." "Of course, honey." "What's going on?" "I'm going to be filing for divorce soon, and I want our friends to hear the truth from me before the rumors start flying." Karen's intake of breath was audible. "Oh, Evan. I'm so sorry." "What happened?" "Marta's been having an affair with a colleague. It's been going on for months." "That bitch?" Karen said, her voice dropping to the tone she usually reserved for discussing property tax increases. I knew something was off. All those late nights, the new clothes, the way she's been acting like she's too good for the neighborhood book club. "I'm planning to tell people this weekend at the Hendersons' anniversary party. I wanted you to know first, because I respect your judgment and I know people will ask you questions. Honey, you don't need to explain anything to anyone. We all saw how she's been treating you lately, acting like you were invisible. Some of us have been wondering when you'd finally wake up and smell the coffee." The Hendersons' 25th anniversary party was a Millbrook Heights institution, an annual gathering of 40-something couples who'd known each other for decades. It was exactly the kind of event where news traveled fast and social consequences were severe. Marta had been looking forward to it for weeks, back when she thought she'd be attending as the successful account executive with the exciting new boyfriend. Now she'd be attending as the woman who'd been dumped by her lover and was about to be exposed by her husband. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather and a guest list that included everyone who mattered in our social circle. The Hendersons had gone all out with catering and decorations, transforming their backyard into something that belonged in a magazine. Marta spent hours preparing for the Hendersons' anniversary party, but no makeup could hide the fear in her eyes. By 9, the patio was filled with laughter as Tom toasted his wife, 25 years built on trust and honesty. Perfect timing. I raised my glass. Since we're celebrating honesty, I have an announcement. After 24 years of marriage, I discovered my wife has been having an affair with her colleague, Jake Turnbull. The patio fell silent. Marta froze, pale as stone. "I filed for divorce yesterday. Papers will be served." Monday, I left her crying in the driveway while half the neighborhood watched. That night, I told my kids the truth before anyone else could. Then I called Jake's wife. She'd find the knowledge useful in court. Within weeks, Marta was living with a friend, Jake was broke, and both were fired. The social circle chose my side. I kept the house, my dignity, and most importantly, my children's respect. Months later, I ran into Jake at the grocery store, worn down and beaten. He admitted, "Some games have more players than you think." Back home on my porch, wine in hand, I finally felt peace. Marta had destroyed our marriage, but I'd restored balance. Revenge hadn't been fire, it was simple truth, and truth was enough. The end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.